the Baen Free Radio Hour.
On the podcast, telegram just in from the sentient asteroid Mamastides. Dear Mom, stop. Humans not nice, stop. Hit the space pipe where they live, stop. Banged it and made a pretty vibration, stop. Humans use space pipe for nests, stop. Humans don't behave like us, stop. They just do things, stop. They came at me, Mama, stop. I got hit by them, stop. Not nice, stop. Humans not nice at all. Double stop. Plus, we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of Alliance of Equals by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. All right now. Welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour podcast. It's an honor to have you along. I'm Baen editor Tony Daniel. This time we have a discussion with Travis S. Taylor and Jody Lynn Nye on Moonbeam, their new young adult novel set on, wait for it, on Earth's moon. It's about a group of kids led by mad scientist Travis S. Taylor, Dr. Nathan Sparks, who have a YouTube channel where they do all kinds of cool moon stuff, but danger strikes, and the team of nerdlies has to band together and act quickly and smartly to deal with a sudden sunspot blast on the moon's far side that has nearly fried a telescopic station that's being built there. Hey, Toni Weisskopf, publisher of Baen, sits in as host on this one, and I got to watch for once. So thanks, Toni. Plus, we continue our complete audiobook serialization of Liaden Universe novel Alliance of Equals by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. Now here's the news. Hey, a heads up for August. The next entry in the Monster Hunter series is rattling at the gates and ready to burst out or raring to go. This is Monster Hunter Siege by Larry Correia. Go big or go home. When Monster Hunter International's top hunter Owen Zastava Pitt was given a tip about some hunters who had gone missing in action, he didn't realize their rescue mission would snowball into the biggest operation in MHI's history. Their men are being held prisoner in a horrific nightmare dimension, and the only way to reach them is through the radioactive ruins of a monster-infested war zone. Oh yes, it's D-Day at the City of Monsters. Monster Hunter Siege, Book 6 in the Monster Hunter series will be at booksellers everywhere on August 1st, 2017. This is a discussion with Travis S. Taylor and Jody Lynn Nye on Moonbeam, their new novel for teens of about 12 and up, including us adults who are still filled with a sense of wonder now and again. Baen publisher Toni Weisskopf hosts the talk.
I'm Toni Weisskopf. I'm the publisher of Baen Books, and I am your guest podcast host today. We're going to be talking about Moonbeam by Travis S. Taylor and Jody Lynn Nye. And I'd like to welcome Travis and Jody and the cover and interior illustrator Dominic Harman to the podcast. I'm going to go ahead and read your bios, and then we'll jump into the questions. Travis S. Taylor, Ph.D., is the co-creator and star of the National Geographic Channel's hit series Rocket City Rednecks, and has been seen on the Weather Channel's Three Scientists Walk Into a Bar. He's a physicist who has worked on various programs for the Department of Defense and NASA for the past 20 or so years. His expertise includes advanced propulsion concepts, very large space telescopes, space-based beamed energy systems, future combat technologies, and next-generation space launch concepts. Taylor's also the author of the pulse-pounding, cutting-edge science fiction, the Tau Ceti Agenda series, which includes One Good Soldier, Tau Ceti Agenda, One Day on Mars, and Trail of Evil, as well as his groundbreaking Warp Speed series with entries Warp Speed and the Quantum Connection. Jody Lynn Nye is known for her numerous works of science fiction and fantasy, including An Unexpected Apprentice and its sequel, A Forthcoming Wizard, Applied Mythology, Advanced Mythology, and others. She's collaborated with the New York Times bestselling author Anne McCaffrey on The Death of Sleep, The Ship Who Won, Duna, and other novels, and with another New York Times bestselling author, Robert Asprin, in his Myth series. She lives in Illinois with her husband, Dominic Harman. He is an illustrator and all-around nice guy. He is best known for his science fiction, fantasy, and horror book jackets and CD covers. He has won many awards for his work in the U.S. and the U.K. He has worked for many acclaimed authors such as Terry Pratchett, Philip Pullman, Ursula Le Guin, Clive Barker, Stephen King, Naomi Novik, Eric Brown, Ian Waits, Ian Watson, Arthur C. Clarke, and Frank Herbert, to name a few. Very, very impressive. So I want to welcome everybody to the Bain podcast. And we're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about the cover art, and we're going to talk about collaboration and the interaction that you guys all had with each other. So first, a question for Jody and Travis: how did you guys come to collaborate with each other?
Well, it all started at a Bain party. We got to talking about young adult fiction and that we were both interested in doing it. And we hadn't really exchanged much in the way of talk before that, but sort of found common ground very quickly and went downstairs to Kelly Lockhart, Gary Poole's basement and started talking. And before you know it, we had a plot which we proposed to you, and while it survived some changes, that's where it started.
Yeah, I would say Jody and I started talking probably about 3 years ago. We were originally thinking about doing a young adult series based on one of my previous TV shows. And then when the show had run its course, we had to kind of stop and reboot and think about what we were doing. And while we've been percolating on ideas and trying to get something together for the last couple of years, it was then at that main party when we actually sat down together for a couple of 3 hours. It was probably 3 hours, wasn't it, Jody?
It could easily have been that way. Time just sped by, and
yeah.
I just remember the talk, not the time.
Yeah, we sat down and pretty much brainstormed through the whole party, coming up with ideas about this concept of having a young adult book based on the first city on the moon with a reality TV kind of aspect to it, and it really started resonating, and having these young kids doing the adventure, it sounded like it'll be a lot of fun.
So I will ask you, what made you want to do a YA novel rather than a novel targeted towards adults?
I think it's an underserved market. There is a lot of magic box kind of science fiction available to kids that doesn't really have science in it. And I'd wanted to write young adult fiction. Some people think because of my style that I already do write young adult fiction, so thought I just might as well make it true. But Travis had some really great ideas, and it was starting to click very quickly. So it was nice to find somebody who had the same ideas that I did, with also the positive aspect of science fiction. There's a lot of dystopia out there.
Yeah.
But positive fiction, I think, is very important. Not everything should come with the destruction of civilization as its beginning.
So that's one of the aspects that I really enjoyed about the book is that it's stories about the first human colony on the moon, and I really enjoyed getting the tour of the colony and getting to know more about that. So tell us more about the hard part of this. What is so hard about Moonbeam? Where does the science come in?
Yeah,
almost right away. Everything's dangerous.
Everything about being on the moon is absolutely dangerous, right? We've sent 12 people to the moon so far that's actually made it there successfully. And one on the second trip on Apollo 12, Alan Bean fell over on his back while they were trying to drill a hole into the surface of the moon 6 inches deep. And he fell over, and when he did, a lot of people watching on the news thought it was funny, but the people in Mission Control gasped and were scared to death because had he damaged his suit or had something happened where he was injured, he 3 days travel from the moon in a very harsh environment, and he could have died from the simplest things. And so the moon is extremely, extremely harsh and dangerous environment. Space is not an easy thing to overcome, but it doesn't mean it can't be overcome. And someday in the future, not too far, hopefully, into the future, people that walk general lives, that aren't like the top 12 astronauts on the planet, may actually get to go to the moon and have to start learning how to tame it. When the West was finally tamed, the first few that went out there were the explorers, but then it was just regular people who climbed in their Conestogas and traveled all the way across the country to tame it. And so that's kind of what we're seeing here is the people who decided to climb across the gulf between the Earth and the moon and start taming it.
And it's about that time period too that your novel is set, and that I think is just a really exciting time period. And I really had a ball reading it. Who did you have? Well, and let's get back to this question. What in your background training made your collaboration such a good fit?
We had a common interest, I think, in making a positive story more than anything else, and I wanted to approach story. I don't have the kind of science background that Travis did, so I was relying upon him to be able to bring that in. I bring storytelling. I bring character, and I am not afraid of technology. I've worked as a technical operations staff in a television station, helped build the station from bare boxes and walls. So throwing concepts at me just makes me more interested in it, and I think that I approach, and because I'm not a scientist per se, I would have the same sense of wonder as the kids do in reading about some of these things, and I could approach it from their point of view as well.
Yeah, let me add to that a little bit, Toni. So as we would write the story, Jody would do a lot of thinking about what the characters would be thinking and feeling and sensing at the moment, and the thing I would be thinking about is, well, what would they realistically be being exposed to? Yeah. And I've done a lot of experiments and a lot of analysis and study in my career or whatever about. I've studied a lot about the moon. In fact, my last PhD was the topic of it was the main topic of the book Moonbeam. Building a big radio telescope using the craters on the moon. And so I studied the environment in detail, what it would do to spacecraft equipment, what it would do to the astronauts, what it would do, what it's really like, and what's really happening there on the moon on a daily basis. And that's what we don't really know, what the average person doesn't get to understand or get to feel. They only see things in movies, and a lot of times the movies don't get it right. They don't really care about doing the diligence of what it's really like. This is just for show. And we wanted to take this as close to reality as we could with our abilities and with the understanding we have. And I think we got pretty close. And I think between, mine and Jody's collaboration on it, I think you can kind of get a sense of what these kids would be feeling. Like they're camping out on the moon out in the middle of a big expanse with nothing as far as you can see, but lunar regular and then the Earth in the background. There's a sense of agoraphobia and awesomeness that would overcome anybody.
And talking about visuals too, that's you also work closely with Dom to make sure that the cover illustrations and the interior illustrations were as accurate as possible. Dom, what was that like?
Yeah, it was great. When I first started, we first started discussing about the front cover. Now, this would be the first one, which is the aerial view of the city. Yep. And we were pushing towards more of a sort of a NASA-type concept, really. Of course, I had to have a little bit of artistic license, because if you look at the original front cover, which is now the frontispiece, I think you would probably end up losing a lot more of the detailing around the shadow side of the city. So I wanted just to have a little bit of extra light there, so you can see a little bit more detail. Now, of course, if this was actually on the moon right now, you would probably lose a lot of that. So that's the only sort of artistic license I really wanted to add. But I really wanted to make sure it was trying to be as realistic as possible. When just the way I was trying to approach it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the aerial view really helps. It gives it some drama, and you can really get to see all the detailing of the city as well. and how it's all spread out like a grid. If you see some of the detailing, obviously the satellites and the main peaks of the buildings as well.
And I think
just try and achieve that.
The incredible sharp edges too really get that sense that we are in a different place. Gets that across. Dom's referring to the two different versions of the covers that we had. The original version was deemed not YA enough by our sales force, and so they sent it back to us to rethink it. And so I set Dom the very difficult task of creating yet another cover for a book that he had already done a cover for. And he came back with this beautiful concept with our main character in silhouette and the moon on, which is the final cover art that you see now. So thank you, Dom. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's all right. I mean, I think. Sorry, I was just going to say.
Oh yes.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say, to add the human element to the new cover, I think that made all the difference.
Jody, was that your impression too?
I think that from the point of view, we went to the Texas Library Association show, and people kept stopping dead in front of the new cover. And I know it was trouble, but the efforts were well worthwhile for the reactions we were getting.
No, it's fantastic. I absolutely loved. I mean, this was such a great challenge to actually reimagine a cover that we first worked on and take it in a completely new direction. Now, obviously, you do still have the elements of the city within the shape of the main character's head, so that was carried on through. But I was so pleased how the new cover came out. It was like a really fresh new take on what we've already done, basically, which I was really pleased with.
Now, this book also has interior illustrations, which we don't usually do, but I thought it lent itself particularly well to that. There were some characters and some situations that the characters get into where they are looking at things on a screen. We wanted to be able to show them what they were looking at. And Dom also did those interior illustrations. And I kept on adding more.
They were great fun. Yeah, I loved doing trying to visualize the actual, the virtual 3D, so you could imagine it, like you could almost spin it with your hand. And there's some of the smaller illustrations within the interior illustration, which I wanted to try and achieve that.
Yeah, I think we really got there. We really got the feel of what these graphics are going to look like in the future. Jody and Travis, can you tell us a little bit about the characters and the reality show that they're involved in that brought them to the moon?
Well, we start with Dr. Bright, who is a little bit thinly disguised my collaborator, and perhaps just a little disguised, who is reaching out to young scientists. Travis?
Yeah, so, when I did Rocket City Rednecks, we kept telling the producers of that show that there isn't really a show out there that's going to grab a hold to kids that do science. It's like they're starving to death for it, and there's nothing out there. The only thing out there is Bill Nye, and he took the road of being goofy. And I don't think that, that's okay. Young kids really, they kind of connect with the goofiness, but other kids, once you get to third grade and on, they're more serious. They want to have fun, but they don't want the goofiness to it. And I kept telling them that there's all these kids from third grade to high school that they're thirsting to death for someone to show them how to do cool stuff and to enjoy cool stuff with, and they need a Dr. Bright, a science show guy who's an action-packed kind of guy. He's fun, and it's exciting, and he's not boring them to death like they're in a classroom.
Or talking down to them.
Yeah, or talking down to them. Absolutely. Not talking to them like they've got something to offer, not that they're just in the classroom, right? They're out to break things and see what happens when they break it, and to blow things up, and to explore things and understand how things work. And I think that that's something that kids are really going to, everybody identifies with that. And I think it's something that we're really missing in our science celebrity market right now. And I think Dr. Bright just really fits that missing niche. And then the kids, I say kids, but they're anywhere from like 14 to 18 or so, and they're young adults really, and they're really smart. They have some eccentricities, as everyone does, and especially really smart kids. So it's fun to watch them grow and mature, and it's fun to watch them discover things. And that's what Dr. Bright is doing, is discovering the universe through their eyes. And you as a reader will get to do that as well.
You learn something much better when you teach it than when you just try to learn it yourself. So he's learning as much as they are in a way, but at the same time getting to see their perspective and the way that they approach a topic, which wouldn't necessarily be the way that he did. They have fewer misconceptions. They haven't been trained in the same way that adults perhaps have, so they're going to approach things with fresh eyes. And I hope that that comes across to the reader, that they can throw in their own take on things, that the laws of science might be immutable, but approaches to science are not.
Yeah, there's you can ask 5 different people how to solve a problem, and they'll come up with 5 different ways to solve the problem. And that doesn't mean that all 5 of them are right or all 5 of them are wrong. They're just new approaches. And that's what you see in this story. As the problems occur, you have these brilliant kids that are being mentored by one of the most brilliant, mentors they could possibly have. And but he's very hands off. He points them in the right direction, and he lets them go and explore for themselves.
I think that ties into
when you have a fallback position, you fall back.
the time period that we're talking about. It's a period of exploration. It's a period of pioneering and a time of boldness. And I think it's nice to at this particular venture, at this particular jointure, it's nice to get stories like that, leading us to a future where people are bold and problem solving is just part of everyday life. What was the tagline that we have for the TV show, for the Bright Sparks? We got this.
We got this.
We got this.
Yeah, we got this, right.
And that's the attitude that infuses this book. Now, Dom, when you were doing the artwork for this, did you have to do research on what the moon looks like, or did Travis and Jody give you references?
No, I did some research. Mostly, I think it was all NASA. I think there was a NASA website, and I was studying that. It was basically the contrast. What really struck me is so stark. Now, that was obviously going back to the first illustration, as in I was sort of torn between making something absolutely, literally just black and white, and then having that kind of just slight flexibility. So you are describing a little bit more to the viewer. Now, that was something I really wanted to be very careful of, because I didn't want people to look at this and obviously sort of with a science background saying, well, that's wrong, that wouldn't work at all. So I had to be very careful on that, and I hope that when people see this, that they're going to think, yeah, okay, this could work. Obviously a little bit of artistic license, but funny enough, I was just thinking about the interior illustration of the crater, and you're looking right down into the crater with the bulldozers, and I think that was a nice touch to try and keep that quite stark. And in some ways, having it as an interior illustration, being grayscale, it actually works well anyway, because obviously the moon and everything, unless the buildings are going to be actually painted, it just works. It's a nice touch to it, keeping it grayscale.
Ooh, that's a really interesting idea. Jody and Travis, for the for the next book, how do the colonists get color into the interior if the exterior is so very stark? I bet you things are going to be very gaudy on the inside.
I think it's important to have that. People respond to color, and they feel starved of it if they don't have it.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that the Sparks, most people wear coveralls because it's simple, or rather the Sparks wear coveralls because it's easy, and if you get acid or if you on them, or if you tear them, just replace it with another coverall. But some of them are really gaudy. The youngest one, Daya, tends to wear bright saffron orange and purple, and all of the others have, Dion, the eldest, loves bright colors. He has a pair of bright orange pajamas. And, yeah, they compensate for it. One of the other ways they compensate is with music. That Barbara, our focus character, is a little bit of a headbanger. She likes loud, raucous music, and it keeps her going.
And speaking of color and colorful things, there is a sequel planned. Can you tell us a little bit about the race and some of the spectacle that goes around that? Dom, this may be news to you, but you're going to be doing the next cover, so you should take notes.
Before you get into that, Toni, I'd like to point out something that Don just said that nobody probably caught listening to it. When he was looking at painting or doing the illustrations for the crater, and he mentioned something about the bulldozers down in the crater.
Yeah.
There's never been a bulldozer invented yet to work in space on the moon or Mars or anywhere else. And that's something that we even actually talk about is construction equipment hasn't been invented yet that will work on the moon.
Okay.
It's a hard enough time designing a lunar rover. And so it's a lot of fun just thinking about the things that we take for granted here on Earth every day. I mean, anybody wants to go rent a bulldozer, you go to, there's any place in almost every town you can go rent a bulldozer.
Yep.
But on the moon, make one actually function on the moon is an extremely complicated engineering feat. So everything is difficult on the moon. But we're talking about a period, say, 75 years to 100 years from now, where at least they have them. Whether or not everybody can just go down the street and rent one or not is not necessarily the case. But they actually have them for special use and special cases because they are beginning to tame the moon and build this city, this colony on the moon, and spread out. And I think that's something that a lot of people, since we sit every day on Earth, we take it for granted. But think about it being on the moon, and a regular bulldozer, it's not going to work on the moon.
Right.
That's fascinating.
But drawing these things and saying that they will exist also helps them come into being, because scientists are inspired by science fiction in the same way that other readers are inspired. And those things come to be because they read about them or thought about them or heard about them. It's like the man who invented the flip phone. He was a Star Trek fan, and he said, "We've got to have one of these someday." And when he grew up, he became the man who invented one. So we may be inspiring the people who are going to create the Caterpillar tractor Earth mover that is someday going to dig out that telescope crater.
No pressure, Dom.
Actually going to...
No pressure, Dom. We know you'll get it just right.
Thank you. I was actually going to bring up the Star Trek reference as well. I think that's what you just made about the phones, and you flip the phone. It's identical. Yeah.
Well, everybody gets that because everybody's seen Star Trek, but I like to point out, I did an afterword for when Bain redid Between Planets, Robert Heinlein's book, and I did an analysis on that book, and I realized that I did a study, and the stealth technology for stealth fighters was actually first mentioned in a paragraph in Between Planets in 1951 by Robert Heinlein, 9 years before the stealth program was created. And the engineer who started the stealth program says that he had the idea from reading about it in a science fiction novel, and he didn't remember which science fiction novel he had read it in. And everything I can find, that is the only place where stealth technology is mentioned in that time frame. So I hope we're doing sort of the same thing that Robert Heinlein did with Between Planets, is that there may be some little obscure thing that we talk about in the city, Jody, like the lake or anything like that people may see in the future and say, that's a great idea, let's do that.
Absolutely.
Who knows what will inspire somebody to say, that should exist. I can make that happen.
Exactly. And the fact that you guys are thinking deeply about this and thinking deeply about these problems and putting it into an entertaining, fun story, I think is the key to all of that. Now we're really going to get into fantasy territory, though. If you had to cast the TV show, did you have any actors in mind to play Dr. Bright and to play the Bright Sparks? How about Barb?
Oh, I haven't seen the perfect prototype for Barb yet. I'm looking. There are young actors coming up all the time. If he were just a little younger, the boy who is currently playing Spider-Man would be a great Neil, because he's got the sort of insouciance I really enjoy. He is the brash young teenager to the life. He's very good for that. No, I'd have to think about that.
I could think of
we already
play right.
I wonder, and somebody to do the voice of Leona. I wonder where we can find someone like that.
I can see you are ready. You are ready for the TV show. Well, if our listeners have any suggestions for who should play these characters, please do send them in to us. We would love to hear them.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Fantasy casting.
Absolutely.
I like that girl Allie on Austin and Allie on the Disney Channel. She'd be a good part.
Oh, there we go. Let's see. I did want to talk a little bit about the sequel. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about what the basic concept for that's going to be?
Well, we laid the groundwork practically from the beginning of Moonbeam that the original Bright Sparks had a kind of antagonist. The first 5 before Barbara arrived, a woman called Pam that they just didn't get along with. But there's sometimes personalities just clash, and somebody might not be the best person to be your friend, but it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. Personalities might not work together, but ideas can, if you just let your guard down a little bit. The idea that we have for this moon tracks is going to be a race around the moon. And when you are out in the middle of nowhere, people have to rely on each other, whether or not they like one another. So people are going to have to let their guard down. I've heard there are no atheists in a foxhole, and probably the same thing is true for a spaceship or a bunch of racers out across the surface of the moon. People have to rely on each other, and they have to get rid of their internal prejudices, because if you won't stop and help somebody, can you rely on someone to stop and help you?
Travis, can you tell us about the idea for the race? What kind of devices are going to be racing?
Yeah, well, the idea is the race is you have to stay on the ground. You can become airborne only like if you were jumping, like a dune buggy does over dunes and things. And that may last a long time because the gravity is 1/6 on the moon than it is on Earth. But one of the things that kind of instilled to me is thinking about when Eisenhower was a young, I believe he was a captain at the time. He was given the task of taking a convoy from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean across the United States. And it took him 30 days to do this. This would have been pre-World War II. And it took him 30 days to get a convoy across the United States because there were no road systems that allowed him to travel the wildernesses across the rivers and so on. And I often thought about that. Well, there's no trees and wildernesses on the moon, but it's filled with ravines and craters and mountains. And we don't understand a whole bunch about the surface of the moon, and we need to map it extremely well. And we're talking about sending race teams of 4 or so, in buggies to race around the moon as fast as they can and to circumnavigate it. And it hasn't been done in this time frame in this story yet. And so these will be the first people to ever drive a vehicle all the way around the moon. And there's only a road. The biggest road is an unimproved road that goes out to the Aldrinville place in the first book. That's only a couple of days travel, and we're talking about
not a particularly good road.
Yeah, and then once they get past that, there is no road, and so they're going to have to depend on navigation systems. They're going to have to depend on looking at the stars. They're going to have to depend on figuring out how to drive their vehicles around craters and over mountains and so on. So it'll be an extremely frontiersman type of race, kind of like a cross between the race of the Adirondacks and then the covered wagons crossing the Old West, and maybe even Magellan's trip circumnavigating the Earth on the ocean.
And I'm thinking Speed Racer, a little bit of Speed Racer in there. So
we've got more than a touch of Speed Racer in there.
Interesting you should bring up Speed Racer, Toni. And Jody and I have kind of had this in the back of our mind for a while. And without to give too much away, there's an element of Racer X in one of the characters that you'll kind of see in this second story.
It's really interesting hearing the origins of this and the inspirations of it. I'm getting some resonances of George Washington, the early George Washington, who was a surveyor before he became a military man. So I think that's a really exciting premise. I'm looking forward to reading that. So is there anything that anybody else wants to add? Dom, it sounds like you need to be researching lunar vehicles.
Yes, and I was just about to say, this sounds like it's going to be a fantastic cover.
I will tell you, just for an artistic standpoint, before we could carry the story any farther, we needed to design the race buggy that our team would have. And so I had to spend a few days actually doing an engineering drawing of the concept of the race buggy that we're calling it the Spark Express, that our team will drive around the moon. And so when it comes time for artwork, I will send you the picture, the drawings that I did, so we could have engineering details to describe it while we're in the store. He said, the control panel's over here, the steps are on this side of it, the windows are here, the wheels look like this, and so on. And I think an artist could take my engineering drawings and make something that looks really, really fancy, really fantastic.
I do have a question.
That's so much fun with the we have concepts for the other vehicles as well, and all of them are different.
Are there going to be sponsor stickers like we have in NASCAR?
Well, except that they're going to be neon chase lights, and they glow in the dark.
Yeah, the stickers would delaminate back. Yeah, the adhesives of the sticker would delaminate in the vacuum. Now, they might could rivet some metallic ones on or paint something on, or etch it. But yeah, we like the idea of putting lights and things like that on it.
Okay, all right, that's going to be.
But from an illustrator's point of view, obviously, I'll be looking immediately of where could we put the punch color. If the overall palette is going to be grey. But then obviously it would be nice to have some kind of, you could pepper the cover with some really nice punchy colours, and obviously not to make it garish, of course, but it really would be so useful to have that, because obviously from a visual standpoint, that's where you can start working that in the typography as well, using some colour.
Well, exactly.
The cockpit or the nose of the vehicle is a bubble. I mean, it's like a two-man-sized or two-person-sized bubble that they sit in, and there's all sorts of controls and screens and things. There'll be all sorts of color, 3D displays, things happening there. So you've got the gray start to the moon outside. You look in through the bubble, you see them at the controls, and all the color on the control panels and things of that nature inside the buggy would really bring it to life, I think.
I'm seeing a lot more interior illustrations as well. That's fantastic. All right, does anybody have any final words for our readers?
Hope you enjoy it.
Those are good words.
I hope they have as much fun reading it as we have had writing it. It's been a blast.
Oh, yes, exactly. It has. It's been great fun.
And it's been great fun illustrating it, so thank you all.
Oh, well, thank you. It looks terrific.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for taking the time out. I really appreciate it. And Jody and Travis, get back to writing, and Dom will do the research, and I will sit back and read what comes in. Sounds like a good plan to me.
This is another entry in Alliance of Equals, a Liaden Universe novel by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. Beset by the angry remnants of the Department of the Interior, and challenged at every turn by opportunists on their new homeworld of Surebleak, and low on funds, Clan Corval desperately needs to reestablish its position as one of the top trading clans in known space. To this end, Master Trader Sean Yosgalen and Corval's premier trade ship Dutiful Passage is on a mission to establish new business associations and to build a strong primary route that links well with existing loops and secondary routes. But reestablishing trade and preserving the lives of the few remaining members of the clan aren't all of Corval's problem. Matters come to a head as Dutiful Passage, accustomed to being welcomed and feted at those ports on its call list, finds itself denied docking and blacklisting while agents of the DOI mount armed attacks on others of Corval's traders. under the very eyes of port security systems. Traveling with dutiful trader on this unsettling journey is Paddy O'Scalin, the master trader's heir and his apprentice. Paddy is eager to make up for time lost due to Corval's unpleasantness with the Department of the Interior, but she is also keeping a secret so intense that her coming of age and perhaps her very life is threatened by it. And here is the latest entry in Sharon Lee and Steve Miller's Alliance of Equals.
Hey, Haz. The voice was familiar, even welcome, but entirely out of place. Even so near a comrade as Tolly had become, he had no place by her birth. Indeed, should the elder find him, "Come on, Haz, rise and shine." Blades and blood. If he kept up in such a manner, he would see himself dead before this day was out, and by her hand before she obeyed the order to turn the weapon upon herself. She extended an arm, meaning to snatch and stifle him. Oof! Her elbow smacked into a barrier. Her hand smacked her nose hard enough to bring tears. "Yeah. Sorry about that. We had to fold you up some to get you into the dock. Gonna take some unkinking to get you out." There was a pause. "Be a lot easier if you'd open your eyes and get with the program. The pilot's gonna be needing me back at the board for breakout. And you don't want to be stuck in there now you're awake. You're awake, aren't you, Haz? 'Cause if not, maybe I should wait to thank you for saving my life." Recent memory came boiling back then. Tolly, the whistle, the woman striking him with the butt of her gun, opening a gash on his face, the kick of her weapon against her palm as she neutralized the threat to her partner. She opened her eyes. Tolly's face was above hers. Tan skin, freckles, even features that she had come to understand soothed Terrans and Liadens alike. His hair was an undistinguished yellow, and his eyes were blue, neither particularly dark nor noticeably pale. At the moment, they were squinted slightly, as if he were looking into a bright light, or straining to see something clearly at a distance. "You are yourself again?" she demanded. "You were not late for your ship?" But he had said something just now, had he not, about breakout and the pilot wanting him at his board? "I'm myself again, and I made my ship. All because of you," he said, giving her a grin. "Come on now, let's get you up on your feet." Some while later, unkinked, on her feet, and in the galley, second handwich half eaten, Haz considered what Tolly had told her. Wounded and in danger of her life, she had been brought aboard the ship that had contracted his services and placed in the auto dock. The pilot's mission was of some urgency. Tokal was reluctant to put her lift back, and also reluctant, so Tolly had it, to endanger one in the service of Clan Corval. Pilot Tokal had therefore contacted Captain Robertson herself and obtained her permission for Hasenthal's attachment to the mission. "How is it that the captain gave her permission so easily?" Hasenthal asked. Tolly was leaning against the counter, a mug in one hand, from which he occasionally sipped tea. "Pilot Tokal's known to Corval," Tolly said. "One of the first things the pilot said to me, once we got you situated, was that this ship doesn't count Corval as trouble." Hasenthal thought about that, around another bite of handwich. "I will make myself known to Pilot Tokal," she said eventually. "She is not among the lists of allies which I was given to learn. Also, I should report in Commander Lizardi." But given Tolly's recital of events, Commander Lizardi had likely struck Hasenthal Norfelium from the lists of port security several sure-bleak days ago. Captain Robertson being aware of your situation, and ours, it wouldn't surprise me if she right away called Commander Liz and explained your leaving so sudden. The captain, of course, understood chain of command, Hasenthal thought, finishing the handwich and reaching for the mug of plain water. It had surely been done, as Tolly said, and already someone else walking her beat, beside a partner who was not Tolly Jones. She finished the water, stood, and placed the mug into the washer, waiting a moment while Tolly dealt similarly with his mug. "I will," she said again, "make myself known to Pilot Tokol." "Sure thing," Tolly said. "You stay right here. I'll send her in." "It might be," Priscilla said, sipping her wine, "that Paddy's being prudent. Brunig's rock generated a great many secrets. She might well have locked them behind walls." They were in their private quarters, and at their ease, having ruthlessly rearranged schedules to gain 2 shifts together, saving an emergency call upon the captain, naturally. There was also the possibility of an emergency call upon the master trader, but that was not nearly so likely. At least, not until they came out of jump. "I spoke to Lena," Priscilla continued. She was reclining on the lounge, her long, slim shape draped in a starry blue robe that bared her breasts, a fashion from her home world, where Priscilla had been the initiate of a goddess. In comparison, Sean's robe of deep red, broidered with yellow flowers and belted at his waist, was the merest commonplace. He sat on the rug beside the lounge, looking up into her face and her eyes like black diamonds beneath arching black brows. Lena hasn't had another glimpse of this wall, though she's still aware of Paddy shifting the energy raised in the dance. Somewhere. She smiled slightly. She asked me to tell you that her least willing student has become, over these last few sessions, somewhat more willing. Sean lifted his glass high. "Behold me relieved. One naturally wishes one's heir to accumulate accolades, but least willing student of Debriat in the history of the dance is not quite in the line of one's fondest hopes." Priscilla laughed. "She already has avid student of Menfriat," she pointed out. "There is that. Am I to understand that Lena remains willing to wait, to watch with the rest of us, and to hope that the child wakens to her fullness with, shall we say, as little trauma as possible?" "She'd rather not force Paddy into her power," Priscilla said, her eyes serious. "Neither would I. Nor I. The healers are in accord." He raised his glass again in salute. Priscilla raised hers. There was a small, sharp clink as the rims kissed, and they drank. A moment only to savor the vintage before Priscilla raised her glass once more. Sean lifted his in echo. "To the bright life, who would share our lives and our love, we invite you to this time and this place where we will welcome you and treasure you." She drank with a flourish and set the empty glass aside. Sean did the same, though with perhaps more puzzlement than flourish. Priscilla extended a hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, her fingers pale as cream against his brown palm. The familiar sweep of her aura simultaneously soothed and thrilled him. "Priscilla," he ventured. Yes, my love. Are we going to have a child? She smiled, and he did, giddy with her joy. If the goddess is willing, and you are. He bent his head to kiss her hand. Willing, though laggard. Why now, I wonder? A dark thread rippled through her joy, gone before he could read it. If I say that the goddess came to me in a dream and told me that now is the time, the soul which will come to us as our child is ready, will that make you less willing? He considered that seriously. His respect for Priscilla's faith did not particularly extend to her goddess, whom he regarded as unnecessarily meddlesome. On the other hand, the Delms had made it clear that full nurseries were a priority of the house. Not that the Delms were anything less than meddlesome themselves. However, the thought of holding their child, with Priscilla's black eyes and softly curling hair, fair melted him where he sat. He shook his head and smiled wryly. Let us leave it there. I am willing. No, I am eager. Not too eager, I hope, Priscilla said. She swung her legs over the side of the lounge, drawing him to her as she sat up. He rose to his knees and kissed an upstanding nipple, the shiver of her delighted lust warming him. Not too eager, she repeated, running her fingers through his hair. She slipped a hand beneath his chin and raised his face. We have ours, she whispered, and kissed him. Paddy was at Runig's Rock, and she was afraid. So much depended on her, on all of them, but she was the only one who was afraid. Quinn was grim, and Silvor serious, but they weren't afraid. They didn't huddle in their beds after lights out, shivering with nothing more than fear. Grandfather Lucan and Cousin Corrine were quite matter-of-fact, even when discussing those plans of evacuation, the success of which depended upon them staying behind to hold the enemy. To buy pilots and passengers, time to board the ship, time to tumble out into space and be well away. Time bought with Corrine and Lucan's lives, which they very well knew, and yet they were not afraid. Paddy Yosgallen, whose duty was to stand co-pilot, to protect the pilot and the ship and the passengers, Paddy Yosgallen was afraid. Silvor, whose duty was the most terrible of all, to protect the babies, to keep them quiet and warm, fed and calm. And under no circumstances, in no conceivable situation, was he to allow them to fall into the hands of their enemies. Silvor carried a pistol, and Grandfather had very carefully explained who those pellets were for, and that Silvor must be very quick and very certain, and that he must not miss when it came to the last shot. Silvor was solemn. He was earnest. Silvor did not want to hurt the babies, his cousins. Certainly he did not want to hurt himself. But Silvor was not afraid. He absorbed his duty, learned what he must do and the manner of it. He drilled, he danced, and sometimes in the evening, when drills and dance and lessons were done, he would sit and draw pictures of home. Certain of the cats, Jeeves, the East Flower Garden, the stream, and the stepping stones. Of them all, each holding duties far more terrible than her own, only Paddy Yosgallen was afraid. Sometimes in the night she was so overcome with fear that she cried under the blankets, her fist stuffed in her mouth lest she wake Quinn, who had sharp ears even in sleep. Not that Quinn would mock her, but he was her pilot. He would question her ability to do her duty, rightly so. He might properly bring his concern to Grandfather, who would... What? There was no one else to take Paddy's duty. Grandfather held a third-class license. Cousin Corrine was no pilot at all. She was Quinn's co-pilot. That duty was hers, and hers alone, and she could not let fear cripple her. Ah! The cry woke her, and she sat up, chest heaving with sobs, her face wet with tears. Lights came up, illuminating her familiar quarters on the passage where her screen, stylus, and boots were all floating significantly above the surfaces where they had been resting when she sought her bunk. No, not here, not now. She covered her face with her hands and swallowed, taking a deep breath against the sobs, just as she had done the night she had decided, on the rock, what she must do with her fear. That night, she had completed a pilot's breathing exercise, and when the sobs had subsided, she had lain down and run the rainbow, telling herself at the end of the sequence not to sleep, but to arise with sharpened senses and go to the practice room. She had done that without waking anyone, and there she had danced. In her mind's eye, she had danced inside her room at the end of the rainbow, and her dancing had built a closet made of stone. She had stepped into the closet and screamed out all her fear and all her tears. When she was empty, she exited and locked the closet behind her. Aboard the passage, with less than 2 hours until the end of her sleep shift, she could not go to any of the practice rooms. The ship would note her deviation from schedule and alert Father or the captain or the officer on duty. She would have to explain herself, and it was the last thing she wanted to tell anyone, least of all Father, that she was a coward, and that she had lied to him. So then, shivering, but no longer crying, Paddy slipped out of her bunk. She glared at her boots, which were floating at about the level of her nose, breathed in, and snapped, "Behave!" They hit the floor with a solid thump. Behind her, she heard the stylus strike the desktop and roll, and her screen settle with a bump. Paddy looked about her quarters. Far too cramped here for Menfriat. But it was not, she thought suddenly, too cramped to dance Debriat. For focus, was it? And to make her aware of her intent? Yes, certainly. The closet had weakened since its creation. She would reinforce it, make it so strong that the fear would never break free again. She took a breath, brought her imaginary ball in front of her heart, and called upon her intentions.
That was another entry in the complete audiobook serialization of Alliance of Equals by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. And that's it for the podcast. Thanks to Audible.com, to Toni Weisskopf, and to podcast theme composer Ruth Judkowitz. And a laser pointer capable of taking down small drones and low-flying dragonflies, especially at this time of year when those dragonflies are concerned with lots of conjugal visits, shall we say, for use in indicating the road forward to an adventure-starved populace, plus a pink Cadillac full of belly flops, those irregular jelly beans that taste like curiosity itself, for Travis S. Taylor and Jody Lynn Nye, authors of Moonbeam. Please join us next time here at the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy, and keep reaching for the stars.